What's the most insane coincidence you've experienced? My family used to take little summer vacations. One summer, I was about 7-8. We stayed at a campground about 4 hours from home. There were a bunch of kids there and one day we all started playing tag. I was IT and was chasing another young boy, and when I tagged him, I pushed him too hard and he fell and broke his arm. I remember the scene vividly. Fast forward to college. I became good friends with my neighbor in the dorm, and we ended up getting a place together our sophomore year. The following year, no longer living together, we went out for a few beers and the topic of broken bones came up. I've only broken one bone, and it was my arm when I was 7. Some kid at a campground pushed me over while playing tag. It was me. Still can't believe it. No tag backs. One time I parked, without even noticing, next to a car with the same license plate as me. I had a MA plate, she had a NH plate, both with the same 5-digit number. The weirder thing was that both of us had kept the plate as a novelty plate because the state wasn't making 5-digit plate numbers anymore, but a family member wanted to keep it. In my case, my dad wanted to keep his dad's plate. My first semester of college, I moved out of state. I was first to move into the apartment and had a few days to myself. After orientation I found my new roommate sitting on his bed. When I introduced myself, he asked where I was from. When I told him, he said, "I used to have a friend named Simon." I said I used to have a friend named Will. We were best friends in 1st and 2nd grade until his family moved. Sounds like an in-betweeners moment. When I was in high school, I was aimlessly playing around our library one day. Like any large public high school, our library had literally thousands of books quietly tucked away in shelves, and rarely, if ever, touched. That day I pulled a book at random from a shelf in the back, and sat down to read it. After opening it, a slip of paper fell out, and I quickly recognized the -10 digits written on it as a phone number. I hastily read the number, and it was my older sister's number, who had graduated my high school years earlier. Someone wrote a number and tucked it away into a random book in the back, until I found it years later. Maybe your sister's number was well known, and located in over 50% of the books. As a college sophomore, I went on a trip to France by myself. I was sitting in Notre Dame Cathedral, listening to music, when a girl I dated in high school sat down near me, totally at random. We were both speechless when we saw one another there, out of the blue, in a foreign country within a vast cathedral. All while Quasimodo looked down sadly, knowing his only love forever out of reach. This coincidence is straight up sorcery. Was kayaking with my family along a river, when I thought I would pull a fast one on my brother. So I yell, "Hey, look, a bald eagle," to my brother so I can do the whole "made you look" game. But to my surprise he goes cool. At this point I think he is just messing with me, so I can't say the whole "made you look" thing. So then I look up and a bald eagle swoops down, catches a fish and flies to the other side of the river. One of the most magical coincidences ever. I cannot decide which is weirder. 1. Did a summer Shakespeare thing for teenagers. Next summer, one of the assistant directors puts together a trip to London for a group of us. We go to London and while visiting the Globe Theatre, we run into another kid who was in the same Shakespeare thing we all were, except he was in London for separate reasons. 2. Go out to dinner to celebrate my wife's birthday. Sat next to a couple. We start talking. The wife is also celebrating her birthday and it's on the same day. Haha. Crazy. We hit it off and exchanged information to hang out again. 2 months later I invite them to my birthday party and turns out the husband has the same birthday as me. I'm an American who moved to Amsterdam some years ago, and my first year there on a random Saturday I decided to head out for a drink. Sat down next to a cute German guy who was in town for the first time from 6 hours away, helping a friend move kind of thing. And it turns out he's doing a PhD in physics. I am doing mine in astronomy and have a physics background. So we spend maybe 10 minutes discussing our research topics, when he mentions offhand how he used to study in New Zealand. I get a confused look, and then get all excited. Johannes, Prof WZ&M class in Auckland, first half of 2007 freaked him out until I explained I was a semester abroad student in Auckland that year, and not were we only in the same class, we even did homeworks together and such. but lost touch once I left the country, with no one having a clue what happened to the other, only to randomly run into each other 5 years later in a random bar in a random city on another continent. I don't know if I can ever top that one. It was pretty darn cool. My aunt died young on the 3rd of October of 2007. On the 2nd of October, 2008, I was a senior in high school. I was in my art class one morning sitting at a table of 4, when the teacher tells one person from each table to go and grab a stack of newspapers for us to sculpt on so that the tables don't get all messed up with clay. Another guy spreads out the newspapers and then I begin to work. I noticed that the paper at my seat is the obituary pages. I casually begin to read it and realize that the paper is a year old and the obituary listing exactly under my right hand was that of my aunt, who had died a full 365 days before. I'd like to think it was her way of saying hello and what's up, and to make sure I wasn't sculpting anything grossly obscene inappropriate. This happened to me a few months ago, and it was pretty dang improbable. I'm walking through BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit. It's the train station that takes you to and from San Francisco and elsewhere, where an average of 375,000 people pass through daily. I walk up the escalator to my train, and pass by an envelope lying on the ground. At first I didn't think much of it, but I took a couple steps back to pick it up anyways. The next part freaked me out. I looked at the address, and it was addressed to me. I instantly look around to see if it was a practical joke, or if I'm about to get assassinated or something. Neither of those were the case. The sender was a family friend. We'll call them the Johnsons. I knew that Mr. Johnson took the BART daily, but I had never personally ran into him. After work, I call him up and ask him about the letter. Turns out, he had about 300 letters with him on the BART, and was going to send them out for his daughter's graduation party. What in the world are the chances of him dropping the one letter addressed to me out of the 300, combined with the chances of me being the one out of 375,000 people to pick it up? Pretty wild. For those wondering, I've posted this in a similar thread. This deserves to be higher up. When I was a little kid, my parents would take my sister and I to visit my great-grandmother in the nursing home. She was mid-90s, blind, and to young me basically terrifying. I hated going to see her, to be honest. Every time we went she would touch our faces, you know, because blind, and talk to us a little. Meanwhile, her roommate somehow knew my name and would always try and grab me, even though my parents never said more to her than pleasantries. Always freaked me out. Fast forward to my mid-20s. My dad mentions, just casually as anything, that the roommate was his grandmother, and my other great-grandmother. She didn't know my name. I am a junior, and look like my dad. So she thought I was my father. She was senile after all. Apparently there was a falling out when my dad was a kid, and he had no relationship with much of his extended family. She didn't recognize my dad because she'd never seen him as an adult. The fricked up thing is they lived in a city nursing home. Pretty big city too. And just by sheer freaking coincidence my parents' grandparents were roommates. I met my now husband at work. Turns out there are enough coincidences that my mom is seriously wondering whether we are distantly related. We were born in the same hospital, 2 weeks apart. We then both moved about 500 miles away and ended up in the same university together. We moved from there another 100 miles away and worked in the same company. We both have relatives in the same area in Dublin. We both have a relative that worked in the same hotel in Dublin at about the same time back in the 1930s. My mom and his grandmother have the exact same combination of unusual first and middle names. I have the same birthday as his mom. We don't live in Ireland. When I say birthday I mean month and day. I am not old enough to be his mom. Also I'm pretty sure I would have remembered giving birth. When I was about 12 it was the late 90s and I was really big into Pokemon cards. My mom took me to a card shop and I really wanted a Dragonite, but it was like $12 or whatever. My mom said, why don't you just get 2 card packs for that money? You get way more cards. Obviously she didn't understand what the frick a Dragonite was, but she only ended up buying me a pack. First card fricking Dragonite. It was crazy. The trick was that every third pack has a foil. I tried asking someone to let me buy 1/3 pack from a new box and he refused. I haven't collected any since. Sigh. When I was 11, I was in the park like half a mile from my house and I was flying a Winnie the Pooh kite. I was the only kid around with a kite at the time, and I was pretty zoned into it, and didn't notice when the string came loose. 100 feet of twine zoomed away and out of reach, and Pooh Bear was gone. Later that night, my family and I went out to eat, and when we came home there was a string dangling from the gutter above our front door. My dad grabbed it and started pulling. The string seemed to go all the way up into the night sky. We couldn't see the end of it. 100 feet of pulling later, there was my Pooh Bear kite. It came back to me. My parents were dongs, so I didn't tell them I'd lost the kite because they would have bitched me out over it when I was already upset. I highly doubt either of them were involved in its return. The kite wasn't tied in place. It was just barely stuck against the rough edges of the gutter. A strong wind could have easily blown it away. This is just so cute. Had a dream where I 1. Wake up and go to work on a Friday. 2. Boss isn't there but 5 other co-workers are. 3. 2/5 leave at lunch and won't be back. 4. At 3 PM another leaves due to an emergency. 5. At 4 PM the last 2 leave because they aren't getting any work done. 6. I work till 5 alone and drive home. 7. I die in a car accident on the way home. I woke up from dying in the accident. I thought it was a bit freaky. On the way to work I feel like the dream is happening. I get to work and the boss isn't there for some reason, so I laugh and tell one of the co-workers about my dream. Lunch comes around and 2/5 say they are heading out to lunch then home for a longer weekend. My co-worker instantly tells the other 2 the dream and I'm starting to get a bit weirded out. I ask the others if they are leaving early and all 3 say they are staying to 5. So crisis averted. Dream can't come true. At 3 one gets a call and their wife's car broke down so he needs to pick up his son from school. Okay, this is funny guys. Please stay till 5. The other 2 are also starting to get freaked out, but you know, we are all staying to 5. Then at 3:30 the company server goes down. We sit around for a half hour and the other 2 say, dude, we don't want to make your dream come true but we are just sitting here doing nothing. They leave at 4. Awesome. I am in charge of getting the server back up so I'm still working. Till 5. And it goes back online at 5. Right at 5. At this point I'm sitting in my chair questioning everything. I figure, frick it. I get in my car and drive home because I don't believe in the cosmic owl. Craziest coincidence, especially given I told 3 people about it and nobody diverged from the dream. Free will be damned. Back when I was in the army, I was sent to Fort Gordon, GA to learn a new MOS. I was running around base one day with a friend and noticed a female private with a hoodie that said patch on the back. I commented on it to my buddy and didn't think anything more of it. Fast forward about 9 months. After graduation my next duty station was the Pentagon. I meet a girl there, we talk, end up hooking up, turns into dating. One day she puts on her army hoodie and when she turns around, it says patch on the back. We have been married for 19 years yesterday. The power of the Signal Corps. What do you know? I lived exactly a mile away from my now husband throughout our entire childhoods, teenager years and early adulthood before we'd even heard of each other and met. What's even stranger is, when he was running, he'd know he'd ran 1 mile exactly when he got outside my house and would regularly stop and time himself. For people asking if the fricking was good, I married him, didn't I? The fricking is still good. I have a similar story actually. 2 years before starting university my parents moved, and when on my bike I would take a path that led up to a roundabout in a new area before heading back home. When I started university I met and briefly dated a girl. While dating I went back to her parents' house one day, and lo and behold it was on my 20 kilometers marker roundabout on that quiet little street. Every year there is a salmon bake at a lighthouse across the water from where I grew up. When I was 12 my parents drugged me along. This was the only year I ever went. I was bored and walked away from my family, and spent the next while skipping stones on the beach when this girl with curly hair, about 10, walks up to me and asks me how I do it. So I teach her to skip stones and flirt the day away. At the end of the day, she gets called away suddenly and I'm bummed out. My mom asks me what I was doing, and I tell her I met the girl I want to marry. Life happens. I meet girls, I get engaged, It falls through. Eventually I meet this girl and we date for 5 years before getting married. Married for 2 years when we are talking about our childhood love interests. I tell her about this girl I met at this salmon bake. My wife gives me a weird look. She asks me when this was and what the girl looked like. So I described this girl with curly hair. My wife has curly hair that had to leave early to perform. My wife was in theater when she was younger. And then I said, and I remember she had this yellow shirt with a butterfly on the front. My wife thought I was making this up. Why would I? She calls her mom. And 20 minutes later her mom texts us this childhood picture of my wife at 10 years old wearing a yellow shirt with a butterfly on the front. My wife was 2 years younger than me and performed at the salmon bake that year. And she remembered this boy that taught her how to skip stones. One day my family and I went bass fishing on the lake at our camp. I had just bought a new lure that day and it seemed to be working better than anything else I had ever used. I had caught my biggest bass ever that day with this lure. Just as we were about to go in for the night, a huge northern pike comes crashing on my lure and breaks the line instantly. The next morning I drove into the local Walmart and bought myself a new one, identical to the last. The next night we go out again and things had calmed down a ton. I hadn't caught anything and things just seemed off. So I make my one final cast before we head in for the night and hook onto a massive pile of weeds. This was the type of weeds that are so thick that the entire plant comes out with it. So here I am dragging multiple pounds of weeds through the water. I finally get it all up into the boat to take it off my hook when I see my lure from the day before wrapped around the bottom. I've never been so surprised in my life, but I took it off and I still use that lure today and nothing else has happened to it. TL. DR. Cast, snap, sleep, cast, snag, luck. A woman in my hometown won the lottery, which was around 200,000 or 300,000 euros. 2 years later she won 5 million. We had a local guy who had this happen to him, just not as extreme. He won $10,000 on a scratch ticket, and then ended up winning $1 million on another using the winnings from the first. Found a 1972 car plate at a dump. Took it home. Already had the matching plate hanging in my basement. The end. A few years ago I was sitting enjoying some pints of beer outside on a corner of a pub. I saw two people, man and woman, arriving with their mobile at their ear and stopping on each side of the corner. They were talking on their mobile and could clearly see each other. The conversation went something like this. M. So where are you now? W. Let me see. At the corner of pub such and so. M. I see. I try to make it in a half an hour or so. W. That would be great. I keep a chair for you. After this the conversation went apart. These two people were not talking to each other and probably did not even know each other. It was a weird sensation, as if they were playing a joke or something. I'm from Quebec, where our French has a very distinctive accent. It's very rare to hear it outside of the province, and my ears are super sensitive to it and pick it up quickly. I now work in Taiwan, and one day I hear someone behind me speak with the Quebecois accent, so I immediately turn around. It turned out to be someone I went to high school with. I managed to bump into friends in a foreign country twice. Once it was in London in front of St. Paul's Cathedral, the other time in Palermo at night in front of a bar. Both times both of us were oblivious of the fact the other one was there too. And while it's probably not too weird to walk into somebody in Palermo, it's really not that big. Freaking London, we were pretty flabbergasted. Oh man, this reminds me of a bloke I met in China. We hung out for a few days then parted company. 6 months later I walked into a pub in London and met him at the bar. At a school dance in 9th grade, I spotted this insanely hot guy across the dance floor. My friend happened to know him and talked to him for me. She pointed me out to him, asked if he wanted to dance with me, and he did. We're slow dancing to some 90s song and get to talking about how we were kinda new to the school. Turns out we're both army brats. Turns out that we both lived in upstate New York when we were little kids. Turns out we went to the same school. Turns out we were best friends in kindergarten. Fast forward, I shared my first kiss with him, unfortunately at my going away party a few weeks later since I was moving again and will never forget it. Best coincidence ever. When I was a dumbass teenager in the 80s, we would drive around town at night in my friend's blue 66 Mustang and spray people with an old water fire extinguisher. Fast forward 10 years and I'm selling a house. Our primary buyer, an older retired lady, backs out last minute. Our realtor drops by to tell my wife and I why. She explains that while waiting our gate to be buzzed in, some teenagers drove by and shot the old lady with their airsoft gun. Dang. She then continues, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with kids. When I first came to America 10 years ago, we were sitting at a bus stop when a group of boys in a nice blue car drove up smiling. When they got closer, they drenched us with some water spray. Second offer was for 20k more. Karma? I lived in Eastern PA at the time and was visiting my sister in Seattle. We were at the alibi room having drinks and two dudes sitting near us kept trying to engage us. We were kind of having none of it, sisters before misters. That day, we left. Fast forward 9 years. I now live in Central PA, like 20 minutes from where my mom lives. I'm at a bar, recurring theme, here, it seems, talking to a friend about going to visit my sister in Seattle. The random dude next to us chimes in and starts talking about where I should go and what I should do. I used to live there, he said. It takes us a while to put together, but of course it's that dude from the alibi room. Of course. And of course, we learned 5 or 6 months later, he is the son of one of my mom's best friends. My mom has known him since he was a teenager. We're old now, and of course we're seeing each other now. I mean, it was practically woven into the fabric of the universe, you know? I have a name common to both genders. Let's say it's Ashley. Anyway, I was at a nightclub and was talking to this girl. I asked her name and she said it was Ash. And I said, haha, worried. I'm Ash too. But what is your last name? She says green. I just stare at her for like 10 seconds, then reach into my wallet and pull out my ID. We have the same first and last name. Currently engaged. The novelist Evelyn Waugh married a woman called Evelyn. Friends called them Evelyn and Shevelyn. So a few years ago, when I just became a bartender and was getting into the whole "oh my god, is it really that easy to get women's numbers" phase, I ended up getting a girl's number on one night and another girl's number the next night. So go right ahead and start texting away with the both of them, blatantly using the same phrases, just changing out the names. However, come Monday morning the bomb drops. Turns out not do they go to the same university, but they are in the same year level, same class, and were currently partners on some sort of assignment. They were not as amused as I was. This is how the conversation went. Me. Text to both girls. So want to get some ice cream later? Girl A. I don't know. Why don't you ask Chloe? Placeholder name. Can't remember for the life of me. Girl B. I don't know. Why don't you ask blah blah? Creativity is not my strong suit. Me. Still texting both. Bring her along. We can make it a party. And then a couple of messages from both about how I'm disgusting, a loser, etc. etc. But the story doesn't end there. Fast forward a couple years later. I'm at some restaurant with some friends and we bump into a mutual friend of ours and he's with a couple girls. We invite him to sit down with us. And we're all chatting away and happily making friends. I cozy up to one girl and we start talking and flirting a bit. Tell her I'm a bartender and she laughs and says, oh, I'll never date a bartender because of this one guy that, and she just stops and freezes and looks at me. Turns out it was girl A and not enough time had passed to heal this particular wound and she got up and stormed off, never to be seen again. But wait, there's more. Fast forward about a year later, I go out clubbing, drunk off my face, meet a girl, we hit it off. Wake up next morning and lo and behold it's girl A and she was still not as amused as I was about the situation. So girl A and I talked for a few days afterwards after the third time we met, but then she just abruptly ended contact with me. I think more on principle than anything else. Haven't spoken or seen her in the last, I think, near 2 years. To all those who say that girl A and I should get together, you should totally run that by my amazing girlfriend and see what happens. Haha. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.